Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Hello, everybody. Welcome to one more week of the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast. And this week, joining us from Germany is Jan Neudecker. Hi, Jan. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Vasco. Thanks for having me. It's really a pleasure.
It is a pleasure to have you here as well. Jan is an Agile Coach and Trainer. His vision is to make workplace more humane, enjoyable, and purposeful. An unpleasant diagnosis 3 years ago at the time of recording had a big impact on how he looks at these topics today, and it became his mission to get these topics more into the spotlight of teams and organizations so they are less of a taboo subject in the future. Jan, that was a short intro. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and how did you end up becoming a Scrum Master?
So I'm, as you said, a coach and a trainer. So I work at a company which is providing agile coaching and training. I'm trying to become a certified Scrum trainer at the moment. But how did all that start? So I started as a project manager, so to say, in a classical environment, did that for a year, thought that is how you have to work. It somehow never felt natural to me. But hey, that was what I was told to do. And so I did it in the software development world. And all of a sudden, one of my colleagues from another office quit his job because of private reasons. And he was an interim product owner at one of our clients at the time. So one of my bosses called me and was like, "Hey, Jan, we need a replacement. And do you want to see something different than what you're currently doing? And you've read this book about Scrum, which I put on your desk a month ago. How about you try that out as a product owner at our client?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, let's try that out."
Why not, right?
Yeah. Looking back, that was one of the luckiest things that could have happened to me at the time. Because even when I was studying, working in classical approaches during study projects always felt weird to me. Like I have to describe what I will build and how it will feel before I actually start building it and testing out bits and pieces. It always felt weird. So there I was being a product owner for our client at the time, which luckily for me had a very, very good setup compared to what I've seen over the past years. A very good running agile setup, not perfect, but I would be happy if a lot of more companies would operate like that already. And from day one, I was like, okay, this feels so much better than what I've done before. I want to do more of this. And I also saw, okay, I'm a product owner now, but this other guy, the Scrum Master, that also seems to be fun. So 4 months after I started doing that, they found an internal product owner again, which was the plan from the beginning. And they asked me to stay on the team setup for a while, not officially as a Scrum Master, but somehow look where you can support and see if you can remove obstacles and enhance transparency and communication and kind of stuff like that. So I also got a CSM at the time. So my boss said, get certified, get more knowledge. That can't be a bad thing. So I got certified after I had 3 months of practical experience. And yeah, I thought I knew it all at the time, of course. And from there on, I grew and I never wanted to leave the agile space again. Found out very, very quickly that I don't know it all and there's a lot of room for improvement. And that's how I ended up trying out a lot of different things, going back into the agile community again after a few years, which is something which is very dear to me and I consider as very helpful. And yeah, that's where I am now. So I changed positions a few times after I found out training is a very, very enjoyable task for me. And I think good training is valuable for people who start on their journey. That's where I am today, and that's how it started. It started by accident, and somehow it became my passion.
Yeah, it does sound familiar. Like I also come from a background of traditional project management. The first project I worked on with Scrum changed my mind. So from then on, I think I also look at that event as a lucky accident. Although I think that a lot of what I did before was in preparation for that accident to take place, right? Because I was also unsatisfied with how things worked and so on, like you did. All right, but on Mondays, we explore not the lucky accidents, but the unlucky accidents that we then turn around into lessons learned and benefit from, of course. So, Jan, tell us a story of a moment where you as a Scrum Master, you did your best, but at that time, that just wasn't good enough. So tell us that story. We'll dive into the conclusions later on, but tell us that story.
Yeah, sure. Of course, there's a few, and I think that's totally natural. So if you're listening to this and you're a new Scrum Master, that's okay. So a fellow trainer said a few months ago, a fail stands for first attempt in learning, and it's a very healthy way of viewing it. I remember a project which was 3 years ago. So not too long, actually. I had already plenty of experience. I just changed jobs, and first project with a new client for the company, and I wanted to do it good. And I was hired as a Scrum Master. The team was not that experienced in it. And at that time, I was a bit too much of a Scrum mom, some people would say. I was too rigid on guys, let's please stick to the process. And the team very early on wanted to fall back into more classical approaches of not collaborating, but rather dividing and conquering the work to be done. And not collaborating and maybe learn new skills. Yeah. And I, at the time, was like, okay, I feel like I fail the expectations from, first of all, my employer and our client if I can't make sure that we run a proper Scrum implementation here. So what I did at the time was really trying to enforce it too much. Looking back, at the time, to me, that felt like I need to do this. And we had a product owner which was actually doing a very good job, and he was supporting me because he said, like, makes sense what you're saying. But that created a lot of friction, a lot of pushback, and a lot of dissatisfaction with the team members. And after the project was done, I really took some time to reflect on that. I was like, was that really necessary? And I talked about it with other people. And I got into that situation again, of course, in other projects. And when I reflected, I was like, let's maybe next time try a different approach. And it's a little bit like kids. Yeah, sometimes they have to fall to learn that running on wet floors is not a good idea. I can tell them as much as often as I want to. They won't listen until they make their own experiences. So this. Looking back now, that was a real failure. That I put so much pressure on the team. At the time, that was my level of that was where I was. Yeah, that was my mode of operating.
And sometimes, I mean, let's be honest about this too. Like sometimes that's what's required, right? Like one of the beauties of this, having this question, the failure question, every time we have a guest on, and that's 300 plus guests by now, is that we hear a different perspective, right? And sometimes helping the teams to go through a process in which we kind of push them, right? Like we tell them, like, hey, this is how you run the daily. And then make sure you do it that way. And then later on, start to kind of open up and let them improvise and maybe change a few things when they are asking for it. Like that sometimes actually works.
That's a good point when they're asking for it. So what I try to do now is that I operate more with, I use the wording like I provide you offers. So I, first of all, when I start working with teams, I observe what's going on. Yeah, so the first day or week, days or weeks, I will just look at what's going on here. What do I see, and what sense do I take out of it? And then I give them some offers. I say, hey, I see some space for improvement. Like this is what I've seen. I think we could improve here. Do you want to do that? Is that something you want to dive into? Like you just said, dailies. Is that something where you as a team think it doesn't work? And I once did that with a team after this project I just mentioned, and they were operating in a Kanban mode, and we should do Scrum coaching with them. But I figured out they don't want to switch to Scrum. And I observed how they work for a while. And then I made two offers. I was like, okay, I will run a retrospective for you. And I would offer you a session to talk about how do the three different accountabilities in Scrum differentiate from each other. So who's focusing on what? Let's just talk about that. Maybe there's some knowledge gaps here. That's all I did. And then I left them alone for a while. And it took them like 2 or 3 months afterwards. And then they figured out like, okay, this really got us thinking, and we talked about it more often, and we started to do some more retrospectives in the way that you facilitated them. And now we've seen that we are missing pieces and that we are maybe covering pains by not having such a process as Scrum implemented, which will show us where we need to improve. Can you please come back and help us setting up the first 1 or 2 sprints so that we can run it ourselves? So they ended up going to Scrum because they wanted to, and not because I told them to, just by me giving them some offers on improvement. And that was a huge learning for me to see the difference in reaction and also in result from the team. Like a team really owning their own change compared to a team which got forced into it more or less by me. It's kind of harsh to say, but I have to be honest here. I kind of was happy when it was done. So, and that's, as you said in my introduction, that's actually not what I want to achieve today. But hey, that's how we grow. That's how we learn. We need to get some bloody noses, as we say in German. The important thing is that we learn from it.
Yeah, absolutely. I like how you explained the way Scrum Masters can get into the coaching and supporting role. You called it, I have some offers for the team. right? Like that's how you called it. And of course, that's a great way to describe it. It's not about what you need to do. It's about the options you have ahead of you. And maybe some of these options resonate and others don't. If they resonate, they're more likely to be taken on, and the team is more likely to be happy to work on it.
I'm a big fan of saying working agile needs to be a voluntary decision. So you can't force people into it. Each and every one of us has different preferences of working, and maybe working in an agile way is not for everyone. That does not mean the others are bad people. They just have different preferences, and there's other areas of work where they can bring their strength in. Yeah?
Or they're just not ready.
Yeah, it could also be. And that's why I really like to switch more to an offering, and please pull it from me. I'm not pushing it onto you.
And the way in which we can also think about this is that the majority of us listening to this podcast today, if given the offer to go back and work in traditional project management, we would rather quit. And that's okay too, right? We have to look at the world. It's not us pushing agile on the world. It's the world pushing everything on itself. And sometimes, it's picked up and sometimes it isn't. Just like we would not want to go back to traditional project management, a lot of teams out there may not want to go into agile.
I definitely would not want to go back in complex environments. So I'm a bit more careful nowadays, like agile versus classic. There's areas where classic works well. And I've had some projects even in software development. I would say they're rare, but sometimes it was not complex at all. It was straightforward, and then that works. And the bigger the companies, the more likely that you have both kind of needs within a company, and just get the people where they feel comfortable.
Or if you don't feel comfortable, also feel free to step out.
Yeah. Taking responsibility, voting with your feet or speaking with your feet. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for this story, Jan.
You're welcome.
Monday is about what we learn from our obstacles and our failures. But tomorrow is Team Tuesday here on the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast. We explore teams and their journeys, the habits they develop that threaten their performance, how each of our guests helped their teams evolve, and the one key lesson they learned from that experience. We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.